She lay in the snow, almost invisible beneath the icy white shroud. Her tiny body no longer trembled. It was still, as if life itself was slipping away. The cold burned, the hunger clawed from within, and the world around her was nothing but emptiness. Small, broken, she made no sound when heavy footsteps stopped nearby. But what happened next would change everything. The wind howled like a mournful cry, weaving through the empty streets of the abandoned neighborhood. Snow blanketed the ground in a cold, unrelenting shroud. Under the dim, flickering glow of a street lamp, a tiny kitten moved cautiously, her frail form barely visible against the frozen landscape. Her fur, once a soft white with hints of gray, was now matted and damp, clinging to her trembling body. Cleo was alone. Her emerald green eyes darted around, searching for something, anything that might offer warmth or safety. Instead, she found only shadows and silence. A gust of wind sent a shiver rippling through her thin frame, her paws sinking into the icy snow. Each step felt heavier than the last, her body weak from days of hunger and exposure. She hadn't always been like this. Not so long ago, Cleo had a home, a place filled with warmth and light. She could still remember the girl's laughter, the way her soft hands stroked Cleo's fur as she whispered secrets only the two of them could share. The crackling fireplace, the cozy bed in the corner of the room. It had all felt so safe, so permanent. But that world was gone now. The day her family left, Cleo had followed the girl anxiously, weaving between packed boxes and bags. She didn't understand what was happening, but the rising tension in the air frightened her. When the car drove away, leaving her behind on the porch, Cleo had meowed until her voice was raw. She'd waited, her small body curled against the cold door, convinced they would come back. They didn't. Now, wandering the streets, Cleo's memories of that life felt like cruel taunts. The cold cut through her like a knife, and hunger clawed at her insides. Every sound made her flinch. The distant hum of a passing car, the brittle crack of ice underfoot. She had no idea where she was going. All she knew was that she couldn't stop. She spotted a cluster of trash bins near the back of a closed cafe and approached cautiously, her nose twitching as she searched for scraps. But the bins were empty, their lids frozen shut. Frustration welled up in her tiny chest, and she let out a soft, defeated cry. The sound disappeared into the howling wind, unheard by anyone. The world around her was vast and uncaring. Towering buildings loomed like giants, their windows dark and unwelcoming. The snow swirled relentlessly, covering everything in a suffocating white blanket. Cleo's paws were raw, the icy ground biting into her flesh with every step. She tried to find shelter, a hollow beneath a piece of debris, an abandoned cardboard box, but the freezing air found her every time, cruel and unrelenting. She paused beneath another street lamp, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. The light revealed her face, her whiskers trembling, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. She let out another tiny meow, softer this time, as though even she didn't believe anyone would answer. The silence was deafening. Cleo's body sagged with the weight of her despair. For a moment, she closed her eyes, letting the cold seep into her fur. Memories of her girl's voice played in her mind, a whisper of a time when she was loved, cared for, safe. The warmth of those moments felt impossibly far away now, like a dream slipping through her grasp. But Cleo wasn't ready to give up. With trembling legs, she pushed herself forward again, her small body nearly swallowed by the falling snow. The storm raged around her, but she kept moving, her tiny paw prints trailing behind her like a fragile thread of hope. Somewhere deep inside, a flicker of defiance remained, a refusal to let the cold, the hunger, or the loneliness win. As the night deepened, the wind screamed louder, and Cleo disappeared into the shadows, a small, flickering light in a world consumed by darkness. The echoes of her past haunted her, but her spirit, though battered and bruised, refused to be extinguished. The storm descended like a predator, merciless and unrelenting. One moment the streets were eerily silent, the snow falling in soft whispers. The next, the wind roared to life, a feral howl that tore through the empty neighborhood. Cleo staggered forward, her tiny frame battered by the freezing gusts. Snow pelted her from all sides, clinging to her fur and weighing her down. Each step was a battle. Her paws, already raw from the icy ground, sank deeper into the accumulating snow, the frozen slush stinging like needles. She limped forward, her body trembling uncontrollably. The cold wasn't just biting at her, it was consuming her, creeping into her very bones. Cleo's emerald eyes, dull with exhaustion, searched desperately for any sign of shelter. The world had transformed into a swirling white void, and every sound was drowned out by the howling wind. Her vision blurred, frost clinging to her whiskers and eyelashes. She blinked rapidly, her breath shallow and visible in the frozen air. In the distance, she spotted it, a rusted car, half buried in snow and ice. With what little strength she had left, she stumbled towards it. Her legs wobbled beneath her, threatening to collapse, but she forced herself to keep going. Reaching the car, she squeezed under the chassis, her body brushing against the jagged edges of frozen metal. The space beneath was cramped and dark, but it offered some reprieve from the storm. Cleo curled into a tight ball, her tail wrapping around her body in a futile attempt to conserve warmth. Above her, water dripped steadily from the undercarriage, soaking her fur. She shivered violently, her breaths coming in quick, uneven gasps. The storm raged on outside, a deafening roar that seemed determined to crush her spirit. She closed her eyes tightly, her mind drifting to the girl who had once held her close. Cleo could still feel the warmth of her touch, the soft hum of her voice. She remembered the nights spent curled up on her lap, the flickering glow of the fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. But those memories only deepened the ache in her chest. The warmth she had once known felt like a distant dream, unreachable and cruel in its absence. Hunger gnawed at her insides, a sharp, relentless pain that refused to be ignored. It had been days since she had eaten anything substantial. She had scoured trash bins and scraps along the way, but the winter streets offered nothing. Her body, once agile and playful, now felt like a fragile shell, every movement a struggle. A sudden noise pierced through the storm, the growl of an approaching engine. Cleo's ears perked up, her body tensing. Headlights cut through the swirling snow, casting long, distorted shadows. She shrank back further beneath the car, her heart pounding wildly. The vehicle passed without stopping, its taillights fading into the storm. But the fear remained, lingering like a shadow over her trembling form. She let out a soft, pitiful meow, a sound so faint it was almost swallowed by the wind. It wasn't a cry for help, it was a cry of despair, of a soul too exhausted to fight. Minutes felt like hours as Cleo lay there, her body pressed against the frozen ground. The storm showed no mercy, the cold seeping deeper into her. She knew she couldn't stay under the car forever. If she didn't move soon, the cold would take her, and no one would even know she was gone. With a trembling resolve, Cleo forced herself to move. Her legs wobbled as she crawled out from under the car, the snow immediately lashing against her face. She blinked against the blinding storm, her gaze fixed on a faint golden glow in the distance. It was the window of a small diner, its light a beacon of warmth against the icy darkness. Cleo's heart leapt with fragile hope. She limped towards it, her steps slow and deliberate, her tiny frame swaying with every gust of wind. But as she drew closer, the door swung open with a loud crash. A man stepped out, his heavy boots crunching on the icy ground. He spotted her instantly, his face twisting into a scowl. "Get out of here," he barked, his voice sharp and unforgiving. He kicked a pile of snow in her direction, sending Cleo scrambling backward. Terror surged through her heart racing as she bolted into the darkness. Her paws slipped on the icy pavement, but she didn't stop. She ran until the light from the diner was nothing more than a faint speck in the distance. When she finally collapsed, her chest heaving, the hope she had clung to was gone. The storm continued to rage, the wind howling like a cruel taunt. Cleo lay motionless in the snow, her body trembling, her spirit wavering. For a moment, she thought of giving up. But somewhere deep inside, a fragile spark refused to be extinguished. Cleo closed her eyes and let the storm rage around her. She would endure. She had no choice. She had to survive. The storm had weakened, but its icy aftermath lingered like a cruel reminder of the night's merciless grip. Cleo lay motionless in the snow, her small body half buried beneath an icy crust. Her fur was frozen stiff, her breaths shallow, barely visible in the cold morning air. The once bright emerald in her eyes had dulled, clouded by exhaustion and pain. The silence was overwhelming. The world seemed indifferent to her plight. The streets eerily still, except for the occasional groan of ice cracking under the weight of the cold. The sky was a pale gray, casting an almost ethereal glow over the barren landscape. Cleo didn't move. She couldn't. Her body was too weak, too broken to fight anymore. And yet, deep inside her, a faint spark still flickered, a primal instinct, a refusal to surrender completely. With what little strength she had, Cleo opened her eyes, blinking slowly against the dim light. Her ears twitched faintly at a sound in the distance, the crunch of footsteps on snow. Panic surged through her. Someone was coming. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but her body wouldn't obey. Fear gripped her as the footsteps grew louder, each step like a drumbeat, echoing in the frozen silence. Cleo pressed herself deeper into the snow, her matted fur blending with the icy ground. She willed herself to disappear, to become invisible. A figure emerged from the gray haze, a woman bundled in a thick coat, her scarf pulled tightly around her neck. Her breath formed small clouds as she walked, her gaze scanning the ground. She moved with purpose, her steps slow but deliberate. Cleo's heart raced as the woman drew closer. When their eyes met, Cleo froze, her body trembling with fear. The woman stopped in her tracks, her eyes widening in shock. "Oh no," the woman whispered, dropping to her knees. Her voice was soft, almost fragile, as if she couldn't bear what she was seeing. Cleo flinched as the woman extended a gloved hand. She let out a weak hiss, her small body tensing despite her exhaustion. The woman paused, her hand hovering midair. "It's okay," she murmured gently, her tone soothing. "I'm not going to hurt you." The words meant nothing to Cleo, but the warmth in her voice pierced through the fog of fear. The woman slowly unwrapped her scarf, its bright red fabric standing out against the snow. She laid it on the ground, pushing it toward Cleo. "It's for you," she said, her voice trembling. "You're safe now." Cleo's instincts screamed caution, but the promise of warmth was irresistible. She sniffed the scarf, the faint scent of lavender stirring a buried memory. Slowly, she collapsed onto the fabric, her body too weak to resist any longer. Tears welled in the woman's eyes as she wrapped the scarf around Cleo's frail frame. "You've been through so much, haven't you?" she whispered. Her hands trembled as she scooped the kitten into her arms, holding her close. Cleo felt the woman's warmth seep into her frozen body. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't shivering. She wasn't running. She was still, safe in the embrace of a stranger who didn't seem so strange anymore. As the woman carried her toward a car parked nearby, Cleo closed her eyes. The world around her faded, the icy streets and biting cold replaced by the steady beat of the woman's heart. It was the sound of hope, fragile but undeniable. For the first time since she had been abandoned, Cleo felt the faintest flicker of something she thought she'd lost forever. Trust. Cleo awoke to warmth. A soft blanket cradled her fragile body, and the gentle crackle of a fireplace filled the quiet room. She blinked, her emerald eyes adjusting to the light. This place was different, calm, safe. Nearby, a woman knelt, her tired eyes watching Cleo with quiet concern. "You're safe now," she said softly, placing a bowl of warm milk and chicken on the floor. Cleo froze, her instincts screaming to run, but the smell pulled her forward. She ate cautiously, her body trembling with exhaustion. Over the next few days, Cleo began to heal. Mia, as the woman called herself, was patient and kind, speaking in soft tones and giving Cleo space to trust her. Slowly, Cleo ventured closer. One evening, she climbed onto Mia's lap, curling into her warmth. For the first time in what felt like forever, Cleo purred. Though her past had left scars, she had found safety, kindness, and a home. And as snow fell softly outside, Cleo closed her eyes, finally at peace,